My name is Vanessa, 28 years old, and I work 80 hours a week to pay installments so my parents would sell me their apartment at a discounted price. Then one day, after coming home from a night shift, I found my younger sister Kinsley and her fiancé happily sitting in the living room. Before I could ask anything, she said, "Mom and Dad already said yes." I tried to stay calm and called my mom. She said, "Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you, but I knew you'd be okay with it." I stayed silent. But 3 weeks later, my mom told me, firmly, "Your father and I have decided to give the apartment to your sister, and of course, cancel the sale to you, Vanessa." They thought I would stay quiet, like every time before. But they didn't know. I had been quietly preparing. But before I tell you the whole truth, where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about an apartment. It's the final declaration of a woman who's been overlooked for 3 decades. I am a nurse working shifts at a hospital in Westchester, Pennsylvania. After every 12-hour shift, where the monitors never stop beeping and the white lights of the hospital corridors never sleep, the one thing that keeps me grounded is returning to my small apartment. 2 bedrooms, soft cream-colored walls, a tidy kitchen corner, and a cactus I've cared for since the day I moved in. This is the space I poured 5 years of savings into, paying it off bit by bit for my parents under a discounted mortgage. And in just 3 more months, the apartment would officially be mine. A part of the world where I had full control, untouched by intrusion, unbent by compromise. My family lives about an hour away, in Lancaster, a quaint town with cobblestone streets and neighbors who watch each other through curtains. My parents, Michael and Elaine Harper, have always been the type to care deeply about appearances and reputation. They love stability, love what is proper, and love my youngest sister Kinsley in a way I've never known. Kinsley, 25, has always been spoiled, a bit impulsive, having dropped out of college several times, once maxed out a credit card chasing a business idea only to abandon it later. But in my parents' eyes, Kinsley is always the fragile girl who just needs another chance. Meanwhile, I, the one who worked through the holidays, skipped vacations, lived frugally just to gain some independence, have always been seen as someone strong enough to take care of herself, sturdy enough to need no one's concern. Everything began one late afternoon after a night shift. I came home, craving a hot shower, a cup of ginger tea, and the quiet familiarity of lying down. But when I opened the door, I saw a strange sight. Kinsley and her fiancé, Chad, packing suitcases in the living room. She beamed. "Just for a few months, until we find a place of our own. And Mom and Dad already said yes." I froze. Not a call, not a message, not even the courtesy of asking. I tried to stay calm and called Mom. Elaine's voice was gentle, as if talking about sending over leftovers. "Oh, I forgot to mention it to you, but I knew you'd say yes." Then Dad chimed in, voice firm. "Family helps each other in tough times, sweetheart." I stayed silent. I've always been the one who stays silent. Finally, I just said, "Well, make yourselves at home." Then I hung up, watching as Kinsley pulled her curling iron from her bag, acting like this place had always been hers. That was the first moment I felt the apartment, the place I once called mine, begin to slip out of my hands. I started to notice everything had changed just a few days later. The disturbance didn't come with shouting or visible conflict. It came in tiny, quiet details that were impossible to ignore. The living room, once my space to unwind after a shift, was now filled with opened suitcases, cosmetic bags, wedding invitation boxes, and sticky notes scattered across the coffee table. One morning, I woke up to find my reading nook The sunken brown chair I'd sat in hundreds of times, the small shelf with a few half-read books, had been turned into Kinsley's wedding supply corner, complete with a mannequin draped in a white trial dress. I stood there for a few seconds. No one asked if I wanted to keep that space. No one asked if I minded having the quietest corner of the home turned into a display zone. Chad walked barefoot around the apartment, tracking dust from the hallway all the way into the kitchen. He used dishes and left them in the sink, never washed, never put away. One afternoon, I had just come off a night shift and laid down in bed when music suddenly blasted from the living room, dance tracks booming through a Bluetooth speaker. The bass pounded against my bedroom wall. I texted Kinsley, "I need to sleep. Can you please turn the music down?" 10 minutes later, it was still playing, only now it was pop ballads instead of dance music. I lay still, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. This is my home. The apartment I spent 5 years paying off. But I no longer felt like the one living at the center of it. I wasn't even that surprised when I saw the dress. More precisely, I just stood silently in the doorway, watching Kinsley spin in front of the mirror, her hands smoothing over the waist of a white, square-neck dress. The very dress I wore at my nursing school graduation from Thomas Jefferson University. It wasn't expensive, but I'd saved through countless weekend shifts to buy it, as a reminder that I had made it through years of working and studying at once. "You still have this? I'm just trying it on real quick. Don't worry, I won't ruin it," Kinsley said quickly, then bent down, pulling the dress off. I said nothing, but as she turned away, I saw that the seam at the back had torn. A part I had hand-stitched years ago had completely unraveled. I touched the loose thread, feeling as though someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. That evening, I called Mom, not to complain, just to ask, "Could you tell Kinsley not to go into my room anymore?" But she chuckled softly. "Oh honey, it's just a dress. Kinsley didn't mean any harm. Why do you always make such a big deal out of everything?" I stayed silent. Hung up. I'm used to it. How anything involving me is always making a big deal. A few days later, I worked the night shift again. Got home near 5 a.m. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit by the kitchen light. I made a cup of tea, intending to reread the promotion paperwork I'd left on the table. But when I opened the folder, there was a faint brown smear on the upper right corner, the dry scent of coffee, seeping into the paper, blurring the printed text. A ring stain pressed onto the cover page, the bottom of a mug. Kinsley had used my documents as a coaster. I sat down, opened each page, trying to make out the self-evaluation I'd worked on all week. Sentences were smudged, like someone had tried to erase my effort. I didn't ask, didn't message. I just quietly reprinted the whole set, and this time, locked it in a drawer. But deep inside, I began to realize, it's not that they disrespect me because they don't understand. It's because they believe I will never push back. The next morning, I taped a small A4 sheet to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, right where anyone opening it would see. No red ink, no capital letters, just 3 neat bullet points in black marker. Do not enter private rooms without permission. Do not use personal belongings. Take turns cleaning shared areas weekly. I taped it up with 2 pieces of clear tape, deliberately trying not to make it stand out. Still polite, still giving them a chance to act decently again. But only an hour later, when I returned from the nearby pharmacy, I found the paper folded and placed on the dining table, with a handwritten note in pink pen. "Feels like living in a military dorm. Kinsley." I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but to be sure I wasn't imagining the sting of being dismissed. I put the note in a drawer, said nothing. That evening, I ate alone in my room. Steamed salmon, boiled vegetables, a little rice. I didn't turn on the ceiling light, just the soft glow of my desk lamp. That light didn't reach beyond the doorway, much like my presence in this apartment lately. just enough to not disappear, but no longer seen. I heard Kinsley laughing on the phone in the living room, Chad clinking his spoon against a glass, the vacuum rolling over the carpet corner, as if they were living in their own home. Meanwhile, I, the legal owner, still making monthly payments, curled into a small corner, like a temporary guest. I started setting my alarm earlier, trying to leave before they woke up. I brought breakfast with me, ate in the hospital staff lounge, and I slowly stopped speaking in my own kitchen. I didn't write much, just a short message sent to the family group chat. Mom, Dad, Kinsley. I think if we had a clear schedule, it'd be easier living together. I work night shifts 3 days a week, so if we could keep things quiet after 6 a.m., that'd be great. And if using the kitchen or living room, please clean up after. Thanks. Sent at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. By noon, Mom replied, Vanessa, Kinsley is planning a wedding. She's under a lot of pressure already. Can you not add to it? I read that line again and again, each word pressing against wounds not yet healed. Kinsley was under pressure, and I, the one staying awake 12 hours to care for patients, scraping leftovers from the kitchen every night, reprinting promotion paperwork after it was ruined, apparently didn't count as being under pressure. I didn't reply, but I deleted my profile photo in the group. Saturday night, after a rushed emergency shift, I got home at 10:30 p.m. to a dark apartment lit only by twinkling fairy lights strung around the windows, the kind of glow that meant a small party. I opened the door. Music was blasting, a loud pop song I knew too well, mixed with laughter and clinking glasses. About 6 or 7 of Kinsley's friends were gathered in the living room. Someone was dancing, another sat in my reading chair, now draped in white cloth, turned into a photo booth prop. I said nothing. Walked straight to my room. Closed the door. Pulled out my earbuds. Put them in. Played a wordless track, and sat on the floor, beside the low cabinet. Not because the bed had no space, but because I just needed a corner. Somewhere discreet. Truly private. The music out there went on until 1 a.m. I didn't knock. Didn't message. Just let the tears roll down my cheeks without wiping them. Not from anger, but from emptiness. Because injustice doesn't always come from those who hate us. It comes from the very people who believe they are loving us in their own way. It was Sunday morning. I was hanging my blouse on the balcony when I heard Mom call my name from the door. Vanessa, I brought freshly baked apple pie. Your favorite. I turned around to see her step in with a still warm pie wrapped in cloth, followed by my father, holding a wedding invitation list he was helping Kinsley organize. They sat down on the sofa, chatting happily with Kinsley and Chad, not noticing I had just come back from a 14-hour shift. Hair still damp, eyes sunken. I nodded a greeting and was about to head to my room when Mom called out. Kinsley told me, "You've been irritable lately, not willing to talk. Why make things difficult for everyone, honey?" I froze. In front of everyone, she spoke as if I were a petty, unreasonable child who didn't know how to compromise. Dad chimed in. "This house doesn't revolve around you alone, Vanessa. You're so closed off, it's suffocating even for us." Chad looked at me, tilting his head slightly as if to study my reaction. Kinsley shrugged, her eyes saying, "See? Told you so." No one asked if I was okay after an exhausting work week. No one mentioned the loud party last night, the ruined promotion documents, or the torn keepsake dress. I straightened up, looked directly at my parents, for the first time not avoiding their gaze. Sharing should be voluntary, not forced. The room went quiet for a moment. No one said another word. I stepped into my room and gently closed the door. There was no argument, but I knew a boundary had just been drawn, with a single sentence, and a gaze that no longer looked down. The restaurant was a small spot in the heart of downtown Lancaster, a place my family often went to for special occasions. I sat across from Mom, beside Kinsley and Chad, with Dad diagonally across, surrounded by candlelight and the soft clinking of silverware. They ordered as usual. Mom chose the beetroot salad, Dad stuck to his classic smoked roast. I thought maybe this was a make-up dinner. After all the tension at home, perhaps my parents were trying to reconnect, in their usual warm way. But just as dessert was being served, Dad tapped his spoon lightly against his glass and spoke with a calm voice, like announcing good news. Your mom and I have thought carefully about apartment. I leaned in slightly. Chad paused mid-chew. Kinsley smiled with pursed lips. Dad looked at me. You kids are all grown now. Vanessa, you're independent, you have a stable job, you're a good saver. But Kinsley and Chad are just starting out, and your mother and I want to give them a foundation. I furrowed my brow, but said nothing. Mom gently placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice softer. We've decided not to sell the apartment to you, but to gift it to Kinsley and Chad. I sat still, a chill crawling from the back of my neck down my spine. 5 years of monthly payments, budgeting every cent, cleaning every corner by hand, slowly turning that place into a home, and now it was being called a starting point for someone else. I didn't scream, didn't slam the table. I picked up my napkin, placed it on my lap, and nodded slightly. Thank you for dinner. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of Kinsley's wedding invitation carelessly revealed, printed in italics. Wedding celebration of Kinsley and Chad at their new cozy apartment gifted by family. I walked out of the restaurant, never looked back. I returned to the apartment around 10 p.m. I didn't turn on the lights, didn't change clothes, didn't undo the loose bun I'd pinned since the afternoon. I just set my purse down on the chair near the door, then sat on the living room floor, amid the pile of cartons Kinsley had ordered for wedding supplies. The reading chair that once was mine was now draped in pale pink lace. The cushions had been replaced with 2 that read, Bride-to-be. I looked around, feeling as though I had just stepped into someone else's home. This apartment had once been the reward for my perseverance, the curtains I chose during the second summer, the mugs I bought from discount shops, the vacations I delayed to stay on schedule. All the tiny things, too small for anyone else to notice. But now, everything had been covered in a new hue, the hue of wedding gift, of someone arriving late but having their name engraved first. I lay down on my bed at 11:30, but didn't sleep. My eyes remained open, hand resting on my stomach. The hollow ache in my chest refused to leave. 5 years, since the day I began paying installments, working as a nurse while studying for certifications, saving week by week, inching toward the finish line. And in just 1 hour, in a cozy restaurant under candlelight and Mom's apple pie, everything was declared not mine. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I was strong enough already. I lay motionless until morning. Didn't cry. But inside, something had broken, and broken in complete silence. I woke at 6 a.m. without needing an alarm, not because I was well rested, but because something inside urged me to get up, to keep going, as if the long night had just closed a chapter that could never be reopened. I brewed coffee to go, put on an old white blouse, and drove to a law office downtown. A gray brick building with a small brass plaque, Lawrence Benton, attorney at law. The office was quiet, a mix of old paper, wood, and fresh ink. Lawrence Benton was in his 60s, silver-haired, with a steady voice. He listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, and when I handed him the handwritten apartment sale agreement between me and my parents from 5 years ago, he carefully examined each page. He asked a few more questions. Do you have bank payment receipts? Were the transfers made monthly without fail? Any email or text records confirming the arrangement? I nodded, and opened the folder I'd prepared. All the proof, invoices, bank statements, ready. Benton reviewed them, then spoke slowly, as if wanting me to absorb every word. This agreement has full signatures from both parties. Payments are documented. You've paid 97% of the apartment's value. Legally, your parents cannot unilaterally cancel this transaction. I straightened up. So, if I complete the last 3 months? He looked at me, tilting his head slightly to emphasize the weight of what came next. Then the apartment is fully yours. They cannot transfer, gift, or use it in any way without your consent. I nodded, not with joy or relief, just a slow exhale, as though something heavy had just left my chest. The feeling of being affirmed, not out of pity, but through clauses and signatures, was perhaps the first time I no longer felt small in this story. On the way home, I didn't turn on music. I just drove through old brick rows, thinking about the 3 months left. I will pay. On time. Quietly. And this time, no one will decide for me. I said nothing. Didn't bring up the dinner in Lancaster. Didn't mention the meeting with the lawyer. Monday morning, I transferred the next payment, like always, with a simple note. Month 58 out of 60. Vanessa Harper. Then printed the receipt, filed it neatly into the locked drawer with all my documents. Each month, each line of bank confirmation, every detail. I saved them all, sent copies to Mr. Benton as he advised. I kept living as if nothing had changed. Still smiled at neighbors in the elevator, still showed up for work on time, still asked Kinsley about her dress choices when I saw her scrolling through bridal catalogs on her iPad. But inside, I began cutting every invisible string, not with words, but with quiet acts. Kinsley, meanwhile, lived as if in a sweet dream of her own making. One afternoon, I returned from work to find the wall beside the kitchen, where a small framed photo of me and my colleagues once hung after our certification exam had been replaced by 3 black and white portraits, pre-wedding shots of Kinsley and Chad, gold-trimmed and neatly hung. No asking, no notice. She'd also added a Scandinavian-style white bookshelf, saying it was to store wedding albums and books on how to be a good wife. I didn't react, just took down my old photo frame, wrapped it, and placed it in the drawer. Another evening, during a break at work, I happened upon a post by Chad on Instagram, a photo of the living room with the caption, "Our sweet little nest, starting our forever right here." I stared at the screen, unblinking. Part of me wanted to laugh at how premature it was. Another part silently saved the post, emailed it to the lawyer with a simple subject line, documentation, misrepresentation of ownership. No explanation, no anger. I just began counting down. 3 more months. Then the truth would find its rightful place. I didn't miss a thing. Each monthly transfer was printed twice, one for my personal file, one for Mr. Benton. Every email confirmation from the bank, every note from the auto payment system, every old chat reminding me of deadlines from my mom. I compiled them all, numbered, categorized, archived meticulously like I was building a case in court where I was the plaintiff. I wasn't sure if I'd ever need to use them. But I knew, if the time came, I'd speak with evidence, not emotion. Week 60 arrived on a Thursday. I left the hospital at 5 p.m., stopped at my usual cafe, sat at the table by the window, and completed the final payment on my banking app. No one beside me. No flowers. No celebration. Just me, the one who walked the entire 5-year journey alone, without fanfare, without applause. The next afternoon, a large envelope arrived via express delivery from the notary office. I signed for it, closed the door, and stood still for a few seconds with the envelope in hand. The apartment ownership certificate, clearly bearing my name, with the completion date and an official red seal at the bottom. I read it 3 times, then gently placed it into a hard envelope, added a copy of the original contract, and tied it with the gray ribbon I had kept from the first Christmas gift in this home. I didn't tell anyone, didn't post on social media, didn't say a word to Mom. didn't look at Kinsley as she gleefully ordered wedding supplies online, calling the apartment her new beginning. I just waited. Because I knew, the next time this door opens, it won't be me who walks away. A week later, the apartment was once again buzzing with music. Kinsley was hosting a pre-wedding celebration she called a bridal blessing, an unofficial event but enough to cram the apartment full: former co-workers, college friends, a few of Chad's relatives. The living room was decked out in gold balloons, twinkling string lights, and a backdrop that read, "New Beginnings, Our Nest of Love." The scent of strawberry-infused wine filled the air, laughter echoed, glasses clinked in celebration. Kinsley, wearing a short, puff-sleeved white dress, holding a microphone, stood in the center smiling brightly. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us. And the most special thing, we're starting our marriage in this lovely apartment, a wedding gift from my parents. Aren't we lucky?" Applause erupted, a few whistles joined in. Then, the front door opened, and the room fell silent. Vanessa stepped inside, in her white nurse blouse, bare face, holding a thick folder and a large cream envelope. She walked slowly, steadily, as if every step had already been decided. No one spoke. Kinsley stammered, "Sis? Back from your shift?" Vanessa didn't answer. She placed the envelope on the coffee table, next to the wedding cake and half-finished drinks, and opened it. Sale contract, bank statements, ownership certification from the notary. Without a microphone, her voice rang clear in the stunned room. "Sorry for the interruption, but this isn't a wedding gift. This is my legal property." She looked directly at Kinsley and Chad, who had just begun to reach out to her, and said, firm and unwavering, "You have 24 hours to move out of my home. If not, my lawyer will handle the rest." The room turned to stone. No one knew whether to sit or stand, hold their drinks or put them down. And this was only the beginning. My mother rushed over, still holding her half-finished glass of wine. "Vanessa, what are you doing? This is your sister's party. Don't shame the whole family." My father stepped in too, voice sharper. "You could have handled this later, just us. No need to blow things up." I turned around, pulled out a stamped and clipped document from the folder, the ownership certificate, and a notarized copy of the contract signed by them. This isn't a private family matter anymore. It's a legal one. And I've been silent for 3 months, waiting for a proper explanation. What I got instead was a party claiming ownership. My mother opened her mouth, but I held her gaze. "Don't interrupt. I've done everything right. Paid on time, kept quiet, didn't make a scene. But today, I'm not letting anyone take what I bled to earn." Kinsley stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face pale, lips trembling. Chad moved forward, but I raised a hand. "I don't want a confrontation. I want you both out of my home, within 24 hours, or my lawyer takes over." The air in the room thickened. Some guests quietly gathered their things and slipped out. My mother looked around, catching the stares, then turned back to me with eyes stripped of their usual power. "Do you really want to throw your sister out right before her wedding?" I met her gaze. "I'm not throwing anyone out. I'm taking back what's mine." Kinsley burst into tears and fled to the bedroom. Chad turned to me, voice low and angry. "You're overreacting." I didn't reply. I simply looked him in the eye, cold and clear, then packed my documents back into the envelope. This marks the end of endurance and the beginning of boundaries. I turned and walked out, leaving behind a party frozen in place, a room full of people facing the consequences of underestimating me. The next day when I came home after a morning shift, the hallway outside was strangely quiet. No more delivery boxes, no more oversized men's shoes crooked on the mat, no dangling bride-to-be sign on the doorknob. I opened the door. Everything was different. Kinsley and Chad had moved out. They left no note. Just a few deflated balloons on the floor and a strand of golden ribbon tangled on the curtain rod. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just felt a soft stillness flow through my chest, like the apartment was breathing again after months of suffocation. I began cleaning, peeled off each taped-up wedding photo, took down the glittering lights strung across the shelves, packed all the decorations that didn't belong to me into one large box. I wiped the dining table, washed each glass, every plate. Then I opened the cabinet and took out my graduation photo from nursing school, the one I'd hidden away, and hung it back up on the wall near the window, exactly where it belonged. The apartment isn't luxurious, but every corner, every chipped edge, every worn drawer handle was built with my sweat, night shifts, and the many times I skipped indulgences just to make a payment on time. Now, everything is returning to its place. Not just the objects, but me, the only person who gets to decide what this home should look like. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not for a shift, but because for the first time in months, I wanted to welcome the morning light on my own terms. I made coffee, the Guatemalan beans I love, but had given up because Kinsley was allergic to strong scents. The kettle whistled softly, steam fogging up the kitchen window. I poured the coffee into a ceramic mug with a delicate petal design, the one I bought at a charity fundraiser for pediatric cancer. Small, simple, and completely mismatched with the sleek, modern decor Kinsley had once imposed. But today, it sat in the center of the table like it belonged. I stepped out onto the balcony, holding the warm mug, and looked down at the still sleepy streets of Westchester after a Friday night. Morning sunlight cut across the red brick roofs, and the occasional car rolled by like a background hum. I didn't think about much. I just felt for the first time my heart resting, not from being acknowledged, not from having to explain, not from reclaiming something taken, but simply because I was no longer being erased. I leaned gently on the railing, closed my eyes for a moment, and whispered, just to myself, "I've reclaimed what's mine." And for the first time, those words weren't a statement. They were the truth. If you've ever felt dismissed by your own family, if you've ever had something taken from you that you built with your own hands, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Protecting your worth does not mean you lack love. Sometimes, loving yourself is the bravest thing you'll ever do. Share your story in the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to stand up, even when the person who hurt you was family? And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe, so together we can spread the truths no one taught us growing up, that you deserve respect, even if you have to fight for it, from your own blood.